Mr. Marty Park, how are you?
Excellent, John. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you here on the Profit Tool Belt podcast. You have been a guest before.
I was lucky enough to be back. I must have done something right the first time. I'm back a second time. I love it.
We just felt that you left us with a lot of unfinished thoughts and half measures. So we thought we'd bring you back to one more kick at the can.
Fantastic. Is this my version of measure twice, cut once?
Oh,
the second shot.
That's very good. I like how you did that for the construction audience here. That's very good.
Okay. I won't try too hard.
All right. Hey, Mr. Marty Park, before we get into the episode, how is it that you come to be speaking to this worldwide group of construction business owners about forward-facing thoughts? Because today you and I are going to talk about how to make 2022 your year. Why are you the guy?
I think just a little bit about my background. I mean, first off, as you know, I'm pretty entrepreneurial. I've had 13 companies in 7 different industries, starting when I was 21. So I launched my first company at 21. But growing up, my family was in new home construction, building houses. My dad did that. I got to see the selling side of it. I got to see the construction. So I had a really good working knowledge of it. And then in my business, my current business, our coaching and training company, a lot of our clients are in the construction space. We've had guys who are in the residential side, commercial side, reno, new build. And so there's been some consistency across all those clients where you start to see, what's unique about the construction industry and being able to take some of those best practices in business, but then lay over the uniqueness of like, how does that apply to construction? It's just given me a lot of insights that's allowed a lot of our clients to really flourish and grow and profit.
Yeah. I know that in speaking to you in the past, the family business was actually marketing condo developments.
That's right. So moving from the construction side to my dad then went out on his own and launched a sales and marketing company. Mostly did the sales and marketing for multifamily projects.
Great.
And so, but again, even when so my background as the family part of that was usually on the selling side. And I had a chance to sell houses, sell condos. But even that, having a working understanding to explain to customers about the difference between the flooring systems or, the construction side and the cabinets, like, well, what is it about these cabinets that's different? To talk about just all those little details that go into construction that differentiate a product. You have to learn about those things in order to be able to sell it to a customer. And so that's probably where my angle came in.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's a good basis for us today. I read your book, Tiger by the Tail. Thought that was very interesting. Is that some of what we're going to be getting into today when we talk about 2022 goal planning?
Yeah, actually, there's a real overlap to that. So Tiger by the Tail came about from having lots of years of experience with customers and being able to say, like, what are the practical things that no banker's telling them, their accountant's not telling them,
Yeah.
Sort of those so-called the experts surrounding the typical business owner. I wanted to give them an idea of, hey, from a real practical perspective, here's some things you're probably not aware of that are best practices that Dom or Marty might tell you about.
Yeah.
And some of that absolutely gets into the strategy side of the planning for a really successful business.
Perfect. Well, it's funny that you bring up an accountant or a banker might not tell you, because guys like you and I, let's use a ranching example. And we've got a stable that's got a bunch of horses in each stable. I'm not knocking any bankers or accountants out there, but they would come up to you and say, hey, listen, I don't know if you noticed this, but the door's open and your horse is gone. That's it. That's where it ends. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Where you and I are like, let's look at this, anticipate what the problems or the roadblocks might be. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to run the different type of ranching terms that escape me? I'm thinking of the PMUs down in the Central Prairie region. If anybody knows what a PMU is in the equestrian world, why don't you leave us a note here on the podcast and we'll all share a knowing laugh and a wink. But guys like you and I actually do the planning where we talk about what we're trying to actually achieve here. And way down the list is whether we should leave that door open, half open, or fully open, or closed at all times, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You get into somebody pointing out to you like, hey, your business is losing money. Wow, thanks. I mean, most people that own a business have an idea of just based on cash flow if that's happening or not. So an accountant or a professional saying that to them, inevitably, the first question right after that is, well, what do I do about it?
Yeah,
Right?
stop doing
And
that.
it's like,
is their
okay,
answer.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, stop it. Whatever you did last year, don't keep doing that. But it's really not that simple because, once you've got all the people in place, you have a method that you're delivering in your business that it's really more like, I always think of the business as more like becomes like a carburetor then, where it's like, listen, I just need to start to turn the screws and make small tweaks to all these different aspects. That's really going to move the business from average performance to really strong performance. And if you think of like Formula One teams, I mean, those guys, everything with them is just a tiny screw turn. It's just a tiny adjustment to maximize the performance of that sports car. And I think our job is a lot of times to point to all those places where all those places that you can make those small adjustments. And so often somebody's saying, like you said, the barn door is open, or, hey, you lost money last year. Well, that's not helping me. I need to know what the 10, 20, 30 different places that I can make that quarter screw turn to be able to really shift the performance of the business.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. I mean, I know that today I asked you to come here to talk about, let's forecast 2022 from the perspective that you take people through. So I'll put it in your hands, Marty. Sure. What do you got?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll walk you through 6 big steps that I think are important in planning. And I think too often people think about planning as being like, I'm going to go away into a cabin in the woods and I'm going to spend 2 days thinking about all aspects of the business. I like the idea that this is supposed to be maybe an interactive exercise you can do with some of your team. And it's supposed to be something fun. And that takes me to sort of the first place. Too often when I talk to a client this time of year and say, okay, let's start to plan and look into the new year. The first place they come from is, well, let's make a list of all the things I didn't get done this year. And it becomes this long list of failed, didn't get this, didn't get the website updated, didn't hire that role, the estimator, didn't get this, didn't do that, still don't have the QA. And it's like, and then so what I'm getting at is that emotionally they lead with, I'm a failure. And now let's plan for 2022. So my first suggestion is, with your team or independently as an owner, make a list of all the things you actually did get done, no matter how small they were. Right. I mean, if you switch suppliers from Staples to Office Depot, mark it down, but make a list of all the things you got done from a people side, from a marketing, a big sale you got, something you did in terms of safety on site. I mean,
a big customer service win, anything that you can point to that's positive. Yeah. Yeah.
A great example. And so now all of a sudden, what I find is people make that list of accomplishments or things they got done, and they start to be like, it's actually a really big list, I know. The last 12 months, you've done a lot of stuff. But now they move from this place of, like, I was actually pretty successful this year. Yeah. Now let's start to look at what we're going to do next year. And I like to then be able to say, so that now number one, you're coming from a positive place. Number two is break down those, I'll say big strategies, right? You don't have to worry about the small details of things, but think about strategically, like some themes or some big bucket items. In the traction model with Gino,
love the traction
they
model.
talk about the rocks, right? So like think a little bit about some of the rocks for the year, not just the quarter. But I found that with clients, if they say, well, there's really like 13 things we want to do next year, some big items, then it's like, okay. I then say, well, which of those things and this is my second piece, is make sure you distribute those across the 4 quarters. Because if I said to you, Dom, what's the 13 things for you? I profit toolbox. And you said, well, in quarter 1, it's these 12. And then quarter 2, it's this one.
And you know what's going to happen.
Always, right. We set ourselves up for failure by front loading so much of it.
I like where you're going with this, but I want to stop you for a second, because some people might not be familiar with the traction system or even have done strategic planning before. And thankfully, you and I, we live in this world. So to us, it's normal language. But can you explain what a rock is? Because right now, only the Masons are nodding their heads. Everybody else is like, right. Rocks. Tell me about these rocks.
Right. So I think this comes from the metaphor of, how do you fill up a container? And that, there's sort of I'll call it the parable of the story of the teacher or the university professor or the science teacher, where it's like, well, let's fill this up. And it's you have to put the rocks in first, then you put the pebbles, then you put the sand, then you add the water. If you don't do it in that order, it doesn't work. And the metaphor, the story, it's like, you have to think about the big things you need to achieve, the giant rocks, the big, not the small details of like, oh, we've got to get a truck number 3, we've got to get redeckled. That is, that's the sand. That's a granular step.
And you get head fake. That's one of the 13
Right.
things you think is so important to the company, but it's a head fake. You're going to waste a ton of time and energy getting a decal on a truck when really you're thinking about marketing or customer service or operations or profitability. And then it's just way down the list on that.
Yeah. So I like the idea that if I can look and say, okay, one of the ways I do this oftentimes, Dom, what's been working? Let's go through what's working in the business in 2021. And you go, well, this has been good and this has been good.
Right.
Again, pulling off this positive. Now, what hasn't been working? Like, where has it been bumpy or where you just know it is a fail? And I find owners instantly know. They're like, well, customer service has been a problem. Okay, great. What else? And they go, construction costs, right? Or material costs. Right. Okay, great. And very quickly, that list of what's not working points to some of the big rocks or the big items that you're going to want to address.
Right. So focusing on the right. Yeah, you want to focus on the right things, right? If something's working really well, then it still needs care and attention, but it doesn't need top priority. It's running. Just keep it running, keep it healthy, keep it fed. But if you've got something that's not working, go take care of it. Yeah. So
those first things are improvements that anybody can immediately see. And then I layer over that, like, let's just quickly walk through each area of the business. And so, Dom, in marketing, the marketing you guys are doing, are there any things that you would improve or that isn't working? Or, you're like, and people are like, I got to do more advertising. Okay. And that leads to maybe things that have become secondary or later in the year. And so I go through marketing. What about your sales? How's that going? I've got a construction guy right now who does renovations who's like, our follow-up, the person I've got who's supposed to be doing the follow-up, it's now taking her 2 or 3 days to get back to people and we're losing deals. I'm like, okay. So as we go through sales, marketing, team, finance, administration, the HR side of the business, just those traditional kind of columns or silos. I just want to see if there's anything there that we identify as being a strategy or an objective to achieve.
Let me interrupt for a second. On behalf of somebody who's got a smaller business, and when I say smaller, let's say they're 10 people or under. Now, that's not small by any means, and I'm not knocking it. It takes a lot of work to get your business to 3 people, much less 10 people. And for those of you listening who are at a 2-person business, you're going, Dom, you forgot about me. Not at all. Marty and I have both been there when it was a 0-person company, except for a spreadsheet on a computer. So we're all respect in the world. But I'm going to use 10 as an example. They're listening to you and I talking, they're going, I don't have that many people on my team. I don't have a marketing department and a sales person. But I think you and I both want to remind them, you still do have that function in the company. You might not just have a...
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Right. So actually, that's a great point, that if you're that closer to the solopreneur than you are, having a team, that still going through the exercise. So in a big company, so let's say you get to the point where you've got 50 employees and now you're like, well, we've got a marketing partner. We've got a marketing agency. And it's like, okay, well, you can still think about what's working with them, what's not. When you bring it back down to, you're Dom and you're just you've got you and, Joseph works for you, right? And so there's 2 of you in the shop and you say, okay, well, now the marketing might be one of the things you do. And it might be like, well, what's going well with that? Well, I'm not doing any marketing. Okay. So at least just getting, what would be the first step there? The first step might be like, I got to get a website. Okay. So, and even, so it might be an internal thing. It might be small steps. I appreciate what you're saying, Dom, that sometimes when we get into these big topics like sales, it sounds like you should need a sales team of 20 people to focus on that. But, going back to my construction guy, whose name is Joe, Joe's thing was, his selling process is people come in off the website and I phone them back. And I'm like, okay, how could you make that better? He's like,
phone them back faster.
Respond faster. Right. I said, what do you think they need to know most right out of the gate? He was like, I don't know. I said, well, they probably want to know about you before they're going to let you in your house. So one of the things we did with Joe, we just added a little bio. It tells all about his construction background, his capability. It's got a picture of him and the family and the dog. Yeah. So that when he shows up at the front door, they know he's not an axe murderer. He's a big guy. He's intimidating.
Right.
So, but he said just that. He sends that out. Hey, let me send you my bio so you know more about me.
It's trust, and right? Builds the trust.
Trust. Right. So that one little thing is like, oh yeah, okay. That's not a big thing, but that made his sales planning was
I'll tell you,
just a few small steps.
to make it better. An example, my parents just put a heat pump into their house.
Right.
And they met, they did the thing where they called 3 people. 2 showed up.
Because you gotta.
You gotta, that's what they think. 2 showed up. 1 guy never even showed, didn't call. And of the 2 people that showed up, 1 gave them a hand scrawled chicken. When I say chicken scratching, I think maybe only chickens could read it. It was a very loosely sketched out pricing thing on a blank piece of paper. And the other company had a pre-made form that had component, like fill in this box, fill in this box. It just looked more professional. And so when my parents said, "Hey, Dom, you know something about construction people, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess. Which one of these deals should we go with? This one's cheaper." And they hold up the chicken scratching on a piece of paper. I'm like, that's the last deal I would take. There's no trust. There's nothing behind that. Right. And so to your guy, Joe, and I guess this is what you and I do, is how do you improve your sales? A little bit at a time. Just pick one thing. That's your rock for the quarter, for the next 3 months. Just find a new way to do something.
And I think, Dom, you touched on it, that if, I use this example. Now, Joe and I said, the real answer was in his planning was, do you want more sales? He said, well, yeah, I want to increase things by basically double the business, right? He has a team of now 7 people. And so he's not a big company, but he was at 3 before. So now he's at 7. But in that, he identified, like, I want more sales. Right. So we then said, okay, let's do some analysis and some discussion about your sales. So I appreciate that in the planning, the individual is like, I don't know what to do. I just know I need more sales. Even the identification of sales isn't totally working properly right now is the first step. Now, maybe that is hiring somebody to go do the back and forth with, like you, right? Where it's like, okay, Dom, help me. And so maybe it's difficult sometimes to do in a bubble, but I think from a planning standpoint, to at least be like, 2022, I know that I got to do something to help with sales. Just that recognition is really the first step. To get into the specific details of it, that you can worry about that later.
Perfect. Thank you. I feel like I cut you off. Are we on point 3 or going to point 4? Or are we still on 2?
Yeah. So just that idea of, if you've got a whole year, you're already working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So let's not try and tackle it all in the first 9 days. Yeah. So spread some of that work around, figure out what's most important to you, ask your team, like, if we're going to change something or focus on anything, what is it? I think the next thing that happens, and this is classic of corporate strategy sessions or corporate planning. They do all the planning in November, they submit budgets, there's all these things that get done. They do maybe a 3-day offsite where all the executives are planning, and then nobody hears about the plan again. It's like, how is it working? I don't know. I submitted my stuff, checkbox. And I think it's like the traditional, if you ever been to the bank with a business plan, they take one look at it, they kind of weigh it. Well, this is a good plan. It's really
flip
heavy.
To the back page where the numbers are.
Right. And then they put it away. And it's like, the idea of planning in some of this is that you've got to build in the reviews and the time to keep reflecting and working the plan. The planning is an organic thing, right? It's all the time. So I like the idea that, hey, once a month, are you at least sitting down at the end of a week with a beer? Or are you doing it in a boardroom, or you go to a coffee shop, or you close the door on your office, and it's like, I got to look at what kind of progress we're making. And for a lot of companies, it's only monthly they need to do this. When you get into the actual execution, I think then you can, if you've got a little bit of a team, it's easier to say, hey, here's one thing we need to do, and we can actually start to measure the execution of it week to week. But I found that, that was a review. The biggest failing is people set the goal and then never review it, which would be like you and me, January, we're like, we're going back to the gym, or, we're going to do, my favorite is the person who's like, I'm going to add $10,000 to their investments this year. I was like, okay. And then you ask him in March, how's that going? I don't know. Well, what's the bank balance? What are you contributing weekly? Right. And it's like, okay, we need to work that plan. And I think a monthly review is number 3, is that's really important.
Yeah.
Can I keep going?
Yeah. Sorry. Please do. Yeah. So we're on number 3 now.
Yeah. Number 3, set reviews. And I say set in that just the simplest thing, set it in your phone, right? The reminder that pops up that says, hey, monthly review. The weekly thing that says, hey, you have all the guys. One of the construction groups I've got, they just started to review things weekly. On site, guys chime in off of Zoom, and they do a little Zoom call where everybody's on it in their trucks. Right. And they run through some of the metrics and some of the things they're tracking and some of the improvements. And it takes about 15 minutes a week. But it now has created that weekly reporting and weekly reviews, and they're getting so much more traction on it.
Can I just, this is something I'm sure you've done before. Let's say I'm a business owner and I agree, we need to review this every month, but January is good. February, we missed it by a couple of weeks. By March, we've forgotten that it ever was a thing.
Right.
What's a simple system I could put in place in my business so that I, as the owner, am reminded that we're going to have this monthly meeting? Like you mentioned the phone.
I mentioned the phone. So I have it to manage me. I have reminders for everything in my life, right? From sending thank you cards to when I'm going to work out to monthly reviews in my own business and strategy sessions. One of the things I find is that if you've got somebody on your team who can also be that reminder, I use my EA and I say to Megan, listen, don't let me not do this. You are on me. And I appreciate that when she brings it up. In fact, lots of my team, I create accountability where I say, I need you to get me to do this. I need you to bring it up at the meeting. You're going to be like the champion of this. And so you really need to manage me, but I'm open to the fact that I'm going to need help. And so they know that there's no threat of losing their job if they bring up, what about the strategic planning? What? You're fired, right? They know that I'm going to say, yeah, I know it's important. And they're going to help me bring that into our regular. If your response is, you're fired, team involvement in the planning is going to end really fast. Really fast.
You're not going to get any buy-in. But the creating accountability with other people, for myself, like somebody to hold me accountable. So my assistant, my EA, maybe my bookkeeper, maybe my foreman, whoever else I can rely on in the company to say, look, we're going to have this monthly meeting, but you and I are going to have just a little quick 10-minute debrief 2 days beforehand. So we're prepared for that meeting. Now we've set a false, just like you said, right? We just set a false early alarm. So now everybody's ready and I'm held accountable to doing the things the business needs, because otherwise I think we're all the same. If I'm not reminded, January happens like clockwork, February, March, what was that thing again? And now 2022 is just like 2021, 2020, 2019. We didn't hit the things we wanted to.
There's nothing more frustrating than seeing somebody. And I think particularly when you talk about, the construction space, whether it be sub-trades or GCs or whatever, but so many people work so hard and such long hours. The idea of, hey, let's make 2022 exactly like the last 5 years. It's like, that just to me is daunting. I would love the idea that, hey, you can see progression every year in your business, right? Whether it's the revenue numbers or the hours you're working or the profitability or the engagement with your team. But you know that, hey, every year we're making this business bigger and better.
Yeah. I'll stop cutting you off.
No, that's great. One of the things I love is the measuring things with the actual execution of this. So, you already have time on site, or you've got time in the shop, you've got everybody's busy, and you think, well, where the heck am I going to find time to do these extra things, right? To work on some of these broad things. Yeah. And it really is that knowing that people are already working 40 or 50 or 60 hours to begin with, you got to really limit it. Like you can tackle one or two things at a time. And so I think, and so figuring out what those are, it really is for most clients I deal with some element of time blocking. Ironically, the office is sometimes the worst place to work on those strategic things. I've had guys who have more success working at a Dunkin' Donuts or Tim Hortons on some of that strategic stuff. And so they go do their monthly review at a coffee shop and they're better off that way.
Why not?
I like the idea that execution sometimes maybe is working differently than you work every day. So for me, I'm in one of our meeting rooms. I do work at my desk, but I have, when I'm doing strategy work or I'm writing for blog or articles or whatever, I do it at one of these meeting rooms. People just know when I'm in a meeting room, I'm in a meeting, even if I'm by myself. If I'm at my desk, I'm totally available to be bothered. And just creating that environment for execution, time blocking it, and sometimes getting into a different space really helps. The other thing I love is, and this I think is again goes to this idea of we're really focusing on the positive of what we get done. You know that idea of if we talk about some piece where, let's say you and I are doing a kitchen renovation, and I say to you like, Dom, so where are we at this week? Did the cabinets get finished? And you go, well, no. In that element of yes or no, is it done or not done? That oftentimes it's really, you miss all the work that's happened. And so I like to measure progress in percentages. So done. Is the kitchen done? No, but we moved it from 10% to 50%. Whoa. Hey, that's great. Good improvement. Or we moved it. My favorite is the website, right? Where people are like, how's the new website? And it's like,
Done, not
well,
done.
it wasn't 0 and now
Yeah.
it's 99%. And it's like, well, oh, so it's not done. And if we just work in done or not done, like a light switch, it's on or off. It's really demotivating. And so I know a guy who was running his business like this. Is that done? No? Okay. And he would be like, basically go down the list. He'd be like, fail. Yeah. The whole team comes away
Great
from the
motivating culture, isn't
right.
it?
The staff meeting and everybody's just demoted. He's like, nobody wants to participate. Nobody wants to talk. I was like, who'd want to? I put my hand up. You basically find a way to tell me that it's still not finished, even though I might be at 99%. He was like, what should I do? I was like, well, let's celebrate. So I always ask people, hey, John, on the cabinets, where's that at? On a percentage from 0 to 100, where are we at now?
Yeah.
And if we can always be moving any of our initiatives outside of just actually delivery of client services, right, of actually doing the work, if we can move it by 5% a week, we're making progress. And you got to be able to appreciate that in the execution. So I'd much rather, if it ends up taking 8 weeks instead of 6, it doesn't matter. If the team is enthusiastic about, hey, we're making progress every week. People thrive on that idea of progress. The business is moving forward. We're always getting better. Our quality, everything. My job's getting better. Yeah. My knowledge is growing. Yeah. So that's number 4, is that element of execute 1 or 2 things and measure things by percentage. The next one I go to is just communication, which sounds like a funny thing, but oftentimes, again, people are like,
missing. It's missing in a lot of companies.
It's going well. Yeah. And so just even sometimes I've said, hey, and I've been at clients' offices where our shops where I'll be like, hey, guys, just come in for a minute. Hey, we just want to let you know, like, here's where it's at with the new equipment coming in. Here's where we're at in terms of our quality score. Hey, here's where we're in this, and celebrate a little bit with them. But letting them know, oftentimes you walk around, and I can think of one of our clients in manufacturing where you'd walk around the floor and ask even the foreman, and they're like, I don't know, haven't heard a word. And you're like, oh, so you sat in this strategy meeting where you've been meeting with the owner and the management about all these things, and it's crickets. So that element of just grab people and be like, hey, want to give you an update, want to let you know where it's at, and communicate the progress everybody's making.
And the challenge, Marty, you probably see the same thing, is that's not everybody's natural style. Like, some people listening to this are like, God, having a meeting with my guys drains my energy. I don't like public speaking. Why would I do that? At the same time, you got to do it, or find a way to make it happen. Maybe your foreman or your ops manager or your administrator runs the meeting, and you've given them the information to do it. To find a way, because
that is a great point. If the business owner, right? If you're like, I'm kind of introverted and I'm not one to talk to the whole team, then hand it off. There's somebody in your team who's more outgoing than you, and it's like, you're now the spokesperson. I need you to go and give that update. I love the idea that the communication isn't for you, the owner. It's for everybody else. So although you may be uncomfortable with it, get over yourself, right? You're wanting to stay in that safe zone of, I really don't like talking to everybody at once. Okay, well then talk to them one-on-one, but do them the service of sharing with them all the progress that's being made.
Yeah.
And I think that leads into that regular reporting or communication. I mean, there's a real, I know some guys who do a lot of work in the oil and gas sector, and they've brought it down to when individuals, in their case, that are out on an oil and gas site, like a drilling site, but it's the same with a production facility, a manufacturing or a construction site. When guys have some idea as to how their role or what they're doing this week is rolling up into some of those bigger objectives for the company, they're excited to get feedback, to hear how it's going. If I've been focusing on our occupational safety standards on the site, and I want to get some of those safety stats back, or how did we do on the last review and audit? Like, give me some information. And when you create that loop and you communicate back kind of how we're doing, the progress being made, man, now everybody's rowing in the canoe in the same direction.
Everybody knows what they're doing. So let's use that wellhead example where guys are out in the oil patch, but take it back to something that any of us could recognize, which is maybe putting up a wood fence around a property. You start the meeting off, or you start the job off by saying, okay, Marty, you and I are going to do this fence, and Marty, you're going to do post holes, and I'm going to set up the panels, and away we go. Well, at our next meeting, you come back at some point in the day and say, Dom, this is the rockiest soil we've ever hit. We can't even, these are boulders. We can't do post holes. Okay, well, now it changes to footings. We still have to install that fence. We just need a different plan. So now we have to communicate that that's going on and talk about it. Instead of this taking maybe a half a day to do all the post holes, it's going to take a day, but we're going to do all the footings at once together. And then we're going to do the panels. Whatever it is, I can't just leave Marty off there trying to do post holes and all I hear in the background is tunk, tunk. These poor guys digging it by hand, right?
You know what, Jamie, you touched on a great point. I mean, we're talking a little bit about strategic planning, like how do you start to plan for the next year? And so some of that is the communication down of, hey, look at all the improvements we're making so that everybody's in the loop that way. But you're absolutely right. To foster that same communication back up. So the guy who's digging post holes in all of the stone has a chance and knows what's my method to communicate, like, hey, this isn't working.
We hit bedrock.
Timeline. I got problems here, right? And so often you find out that it's a guy who's working on site, his supervisor's site super's gone off to another site, and he just keeps hammering away, and he knows that there's a problem, but in the business there isn't that method to also have reporting and communication go up the organization.
That's right.
Right. And some of that I feel like is driven by that idea, if I say anything, I'm going to get fired. So I think that sometimes the culture is no, hey, we want everybody's feedback, right? If you've got ideas, like, we really want to have information flow down the organization strategically and up the organization in terms of how it's working. We actually try to do it.
It doesn't matter what size your company is, it'll work.
Right.
Yeah. It's arguably it's more important in a small business.
Yeah.
You have to, the benefit of having a small business is you can be nimble, you can move fast. So do it.
Right. Yeah. You and I using your fence example, we've got a bigger fence building company and we've got 6 crews. If you and I are 2 guys on one crew and we're having all sorts of problems with bedrock and we're not getting the posts in, and okay, that's fine, but we get 5 other jobs that are making us money. So we can sort of afford to have some slowness. It's even more critical when you got a small business. If it was just you and me as the only crew.
Yeah.
Well, not being able to communicate that and fix the problems quickly becomes even more critical. Yeah. So communication is just as important in the small groups as it is in the bigger groups.
I feel like I took you off your game. What number are we on here, Marty?
If I said number 5, reporting and communication, like I said, now we've just information flowing down strategically and up on the execution side.
Yeah.
The last thing actually I love is I put down is celebrate. Too often, guys finish jobs, there's no celebration. You just move on to the next one. Yeah. We're already late for the next one. Let's go. I think even reviewing with crews to be able to say, hey, look what we've done here. When it's a really big project, to celebrate some of that. I mean, celebrate if you're on the production side, right? Guys are maybe in the shop, like throughput. You know, we've produced more widgets than we've ever produced before, but give people some opportunity to really feel, and it's really a feel thing because we're human beings first in the business, that, hey, I'm part of something here, that I'm sharing the wins, we're having good successes. And it ties to this idea at the beginning of the year as the owner is setting a goal. And as it goes through the year, at the end of it, everybody's able to celebrate. And too often, you've had clients, I'm sure, that give that once a year update. I like the idea that if I can find some things to celebrate with people, to make celebration part of the business and acknowledge people, recognize them, that's so critical. Somebody's recognized for great work on a job, man, they go to the next job and they are just that much more committed to the quality, the effort, the speed. So ironically, celebration is a big part of the execution of strategic plans.
It's funny, isn't it? So let me ask you this, Marty. How much would it cost for your company to buy a barbecue and host a lunch, let's say once a month, with hot dogs and buns and coleslaw from Costco? How much is that going to cost you, including the barbecue?
Including the barbecue? Oh, well, I mean, I'd have
$1,000 for the year.
Kick-ass barbecue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I was going to say I was going to drop a couple grand on the barbecue out of the gate.
Let's do that.
Like $200.
Yeah, like nothing, right? But what's the return that we get for once or twice a month for our guys to say, hey, we're going to have hot dogs at lunch today, guys, and then we're all going to just kind of hang out in the parking lot or at the picnic table out back and talk for a bit. That's a team environment. And those are the guys that'll fight for you later. Those are the guys that'll say to their wife, honey, I'm going to be home 10 minutes late. We just got to get this thing out the door. But if all you do is have your
Absolutely.
guys coming into a gray place doing gray work, and it's just everything's gray and the same every day, why would they? Why would they give a little bit more when you don't give anything back?
I had a friend of mine, Ben, used to build custom homes. And Ben got into this habit. I think it started one day as sort of a bet, like, oh yeah, well, if I lose, I'll show up Friday with beers. And I'm not advocating that, every construction site should have drinking on it at the end of the week. But the
Never happens.
reason I bring it up is, no, of course not. But Ben used to show up and would say to the guys, like, he'd show up on a Friday afternoon. He would show up with beer, just a case of beer. Everybody could have a cold one on a Friday afternoon. But he'd sit around with the guys. And his first thing was he'd say, hey, thank you so much for the effort this week, guys. And there's something so few owners do is just say, hey, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is he just kind of hang out with the guys, right? But what would happen is guys would say, hey, I got an idea. And he'd be like, oh, what is it? As guys got comfortable with sharing with them, they gave him so many improvements on site that he then brought back into his strategic planning, that it was the invaluable loop. So, but you're right. The intention was around thank you, but it's amazing when you spend the time with your crews to be able to learn what they're learning, that's a great loop that you can bring back into the business over time. Ben always said, I got more information out of those guys and built more relationship. And it was exactly when other guys, prices were increasing in the industry. He said, my guys would hold the price because it was me. My guys would go out on a Sunday to get a job done because it was me, because they knew I cared about them and it was reciprocal.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's easy to do. It's easy to do that. We can talk about it here. Oh yeah, get a barbecue, do this.
Oh yeah.
It's also easy to not do. It's easy to let that go this week. It's easy. And those little critical, non-essential things actually are the glue that holds the company together. It goes to culture, which is something you and I talk about. What is your company really about? Because it's more than just a place to employ people and make money. There has to be more to it.
Well, I mean, you think about I've never met anybody who's got a construction project, whether it's big or small, or it's newer renovation, or it's an individual component that they're going to replace. I've never met anybody who said, I can only find one company to deliver on this. Everybody has choice, right? I mean, I can go out to tender. I can find 4 plumbers this afternoon that need to do a job. I can find 3 cabinet makers I can call on. Like, there's an abundance of suppliers for every one of the services being provided. So the difference comes back to, the way the customer is treated and the way the team is treated. And so, there's a great piece that if you're not making people a focus, the customer and your team internally, then for 2022, that is a critical mission in your strategic plan to be like, how can I do more things? And it's little things like that. I'm going to send people to bio. I'm going to tell them more about me. I'm going to get beers for the guys, or I'm going to have that quarterly barbecue, or I'm going to say, hand out the paychecks on site. And I'm going to say thanks to everybody and shake their hand. Like it's small things, but man, the shift that can take place in a business. And that's probably a really practical example of high level strategy, make people a bigger value or priority in the coming year. Yeah. How do you start to execute it? A couple simple ways with the customer, a couple simple ways with the team. And you see that shift, which becomes measurable.
Yeah, I love it. Marty, this has been great. Did we hit all 6 of the points?
Yeah, make a list of your accomplishments. Start things planning from a positive place. I think when you've got a list of things you want to change, maybe things that aren't working now or just things you aspire to. There's a good one, Dom. I forgot. If you see something a competitor is doing, steal it.
Yeah, right? It's totally
They're
fine.
doing a great job of that.
Yeah.
Let's start doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Break those things. Number 2, break them down. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, all across the year. Make improvements. Don't overwhelm yourself with what you're going to do in January. Set times to review it. The alarms on your phone, on your calendar. Somebody bugging you like, hey, we're going to have that meeting. The execution of just take on a couple things at a time. And manage the percentage. Make sure you're just incrementally moving it forward. Report it down to everybody. Hey, this is what's going on. This is where we're making gains. Here's what is working and not working. And then the last thing, when you do finish up work, celebrate it. Hey, we've just launched this. We've just done this. We just finished this off. We've had the record time here, record profit. Whatever.
Floors are in, the posts are up, the year is over, whatever it is.
Right.
Find a reason.
There's nothing better than construction because you
You
really
can see the work.
you physically build something. Exactly.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
the end of it, you can stand back and be like, look at this. And I think that's so powerful. So many service companies, and they don't have that option to be able to really stand back and just be proud for a moment. And I love that that should be part of the culture and the way the business is done.
Yeah, I love it. Marty, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about this. Perfect timing as well as we go into the new year, 2022.
Thanks. No, it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, if people want to talk to you, if they want to find you in this big wide world, how do we do that?
Sure. They can find me on social media at the Marty Park. Or they can email me. My website, my company is Evolve Business Group, or they can simply email me at Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at martypark.com. So Marty at martypark.com. That's the easiest way to get it right to my inbox.
Easy to find you.
And oh, Dom, by the way, it just occurred to me, we actually do for all of our clients an annual planner. So it's literally like a 16-page package
Workbook.
And I'm glad to email that out to anybody that needs a tool to help them plan. It's a great way to be able to structure all of that. If they're sort of fumbling with a white sheet of paper and don't know where to begin, that helps them do some of their goal setting, some of the planning, breaking it down. Might be a really great tool.
Well,
Glad to share that for free.
Yeah, thank you. And for everybody listening, this is what Marty was talking about. If you see one of your competitors doing something that's working, steal it. Well, Marty just told you something other business owners are doing, which is using this annual planner. So steal it. So do it. Take it. Marty at martypark.com, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Marty, thank you very much for being on the show. You've been on before. You're on now. There's a good chance that, if there's enough feedback, if anybody out there knows what a PMU is, that would be funny feedback. That would be some interesting feedback.
I hope my participation generates more than just somebody responding to that.
To what a PMU barn is? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Marty, for being on the show. And I wish you a happy 2022 as well.
Dom, thanks very much. I hope you have a happy holidays.
Thanks. Bye-bye.